Well, rather than declare ourselves atheists, I think we should simply advocate intellectual honesty and reason. And where this advocacy brings us into collision with religion, as it inevitably will, we should notice that the points of collision are always with specific beliefs and not with religion in general. There is no religion in general. And we should be quick, in fact, to point out the differences among religions, because these differences make all religions, for two reasons, these differences make all religions look contingent and therefore silly. I would consider the unique features of Mormonism, which may play some role in the next presidential election. Mormonism, it seems to me, objectively, is just a little bit more idiotic than Christianity is. It has to be. It is Christianity plus some very stupid ideas. For instance, the Mormons think that Jesus is going to return to earth and administer his 1,000 years of peace, at least part of the time from the state of Missouri. Now, why does this make Mormonism objectively less likely to be true than Christianity? Because whatever probability you assign to Jesus' coming back, you have to assign a lesser probability to his coming back and keeping a summer home in Jackson County, Missouri. Mitt Romney, if he wants to be the next president of the United States, should be made to feel the burden of our incredulity. We can make common cause with our Christian brothers and sisters on this point. Just what does the man believe? The world should know about it, and it is almost guaranteed to be embarrassing even to most people who believe in a biblical God. The second reason to be attentive to the differences among religions is that these differences are actually a matter of life and death. There are very few of us who lie awake at night worrying about the Amish. This is not an accident. While I'm convinced that the Amish are mistreating their children by not educating them adequately, they are not likely to hijack aircraft and fly them into buildings. Consider how we as atheists are constrained to talk about Islam. And Christians often complain that atheists balance, and the secular media generally, balance every discussion of Islam with a discussion of extremist Christianity. The usual mode is to say, well, they have their jihadists, but we have people who kill abortion doctors. Okay, I think our Christian neighbors, even the craziest of them, are right to be outraged by this pretense of even-handedness. The truth is that Islam is quite a bit scarier and more culpable for needless human misery at this moment than Christianity has been for a very, very long time. And we have to point this out. I mean, you might remember that Thomas Friedman recently wrote an op-ed from Iraq noticing that some Sunni militias were fighting alongside American troops against al-Qaeda, and he asked a Sunni militant why he was doing this. And the militant said that he had recently seen an al-Qaeda member decapitate an 8-year-old girl. And this convinced him that the American Crusader forces were the lesser of two evils. Now, okay, great. So even Muslims, even Sunni militants, can discern the line between ordinary crazy Islam and the utterly crazy, once it is drawn in the spilled blood of little girls. This is a basis for hope of sorts. We have to be clear, unremittingly clear about what is on the other side of that line. I mean, this is what we and the rest of the civilized world and the semi-civilized world are facing: utter religious lunacy and barbarism in the name of Islam, with, I'm unhappy to say, some mainstream theology to back it up. To be even-handed, as we are constrained to be as atheists, when discussing the problem of Islam, is to misconstrue the problem. The refrain that all religions have their extremists is bullshit. All religions don't have these extremists. Some religions have never had these extremists. A recent poll in the UK showed that a third of young British Muslims say they want to live under Sharia law and think that anyone who leaves the faith should be put to death for apostasy. This is a third of British Muslims. 68% of British Muslims think that their neighbors who insult Islam should be arrested and prosecuted. 78% think that the Danish cartoonist should be brought to justice. These people do not have a clue about what constitutes a civil society. It seems to me that reports like this coming out of Muslim communities living in the West should concern us before anything else about religion concerns us. Atheism is too blunt an instrument to use at moments like this. It's as though we have a landscape of human bewilderment and human stupidity, and atheism causes us to fixate on one part of this landscape. It's got peaks and valleys and local attractors, and we fixate on one part, that related to a belief in God, and then it just flattens it. Because to be consistent as atheists, we must oppose or seem to oppose all faith claims equally. But this is a waste of precious time and energy. And it seems to me it squanders the trust of good people who would otherwise agree with us on specific issues. Now, I'm not at all suggesting that we leave people's core religious beliefs unscathed, or faith itself unscathed. I'm still the person who writes articles with rather sweeping titles like "Science Must Destroy Religion." But what I am saying is we have to be attentive to necessary and useful differences among religions. Another problem with calling ourselves atheists is that every religious person thinks he has a knockdown argument against atheism. We've all heard these arguments, and we are going to keep hearing them as long as we call ourselves atheists. We've all heard the argument that the atheist can't prove there is no God. Or as Rick Warren put it when I debated him for Newsweek, a rational person like him doesn't have enough faith to be an atheist, because the idea that the universe could be created without a creator is the most extravagant faith claim of all. Now, as Richard just pointed out, these arguments are travesties if they're used to defend any specific conception of God. And we all know what to do in this situation. We have Russell's teapot, we have the thousands of dead gods, and now we have a flying spaghetti monster, the non-existence of which can't be proven, and yet the existence of which is a belief in which is acknowledged to be ridiculous by anyone. The problem is we have to keep having the same argument over and over again. So too with the greatest crimes of the 20th century argument. How many times are we going to have to counter the charge that Hitler, Stalin, and Pol Pot represent the end game of atheism? I got news for you. This meme is not going away. I argued against it in The End of Faith, and it was immediately thrown up at me in reviews of the book as though I had never mentioned it. So I mentioned it again in the afterword to the paperback of The End of Faith, and this did no good whatsoever. So then I brought it up again. At the risk of boring all of you, I brought it up again in Letter to a Christian Nation. And Richard did the same in The God Delusion. And Christopher took a mighty whack at it in God Is Not Great. I think this argument will be with us for as long as we call ourselves atheists. And it really convinces people. It really convinces liberals and moderates. It even convinces the occasional atheist. Why should we stand obediently in the space provided? Why should we stand in the space carved out by the conceptual scheme of theistic religion? I mean, it's as though our opponents, before any debate, have drawn the chalk outline of a dead man on the sidewalk, and we just walk up and lie down in it. Instead of doing this, think about what would happen if we simply use words like reason and evidence. Now, what is the argument against reason? It's true that certain people will bite the bullet here and say that reason is itself a problem and the Enlightenment is a failed project, but the truth is very few people are comfortable admitting to being enemies of reason. Even among fundamentalists, I would say especially among fundamentalists. They imagine themselves to be champions of reason. They think they have very good reasons for believing in God. Nobody wants to believe things on bad evidence. The desire to know what is actually going on in the world is very difficult to argue with. And insofar as we represent merely that desire, we become difficult to argue with.